Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'm Karen McCarthy. Coming up, never mind sheep, cattle and dairy cows, we're talking the ins and outs of some lower profile but thriving industries, goat farming and alpacas. There's a goat milk gold rush going on, with a Hamilton-based cooperative on the hunt for new farmers to meet a phenomenal surge in sales overseas. Could this be you? And the fascinating animal that is the alpaca, the llama-like creatures with fine wool called the fibre of the gods, highly sought after by the fashion houses of Europe and Japan, and now farmed up and down the country. My guests this week from the Hamilton-based dairy goat cooperative, Tony Giles. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And from the Alpaca Association of New Zealand, Diane Bulpit, the owner of Silkron Stud at Waimaoku, northwest of Auckland. Thanks for being with us.
Hello.
They're hardly high-profile industries, but they have their place. And to kick off goat farming, it's a boom time, is that right, Tony?
Yes, it is. It has been, and I think we've been on a growth curve for quite a number of years now. And as you mentioned in the intro, we have had a low profile up until now, but we're making an effort to change that. We are actively trying to seek new farmers to come into the industry, and those farmers who have grown with the industry have supported our growth to date, but now we're looking for people to come in and join us as we take on the world. Our business is very much focused on infant formula and nutritional products for young children, and we keep that focus very, very strong. As we go into new markets and introduce a new concept, that doctors and mothers have to accept the new concept. It does take a little while for these sort of products to get off the ground, and a lot of the markets that we introduced our products to 4, 5, 6 years ago are now really starting to take off.
What are some of those markets?
Mostly in the Asian region at this stage. We have markets like Korea and Thailand and China, building on markets like Taiwan, which have been a traditional strength for us.
Alpacas, another boutique industry, shall I call it?
Yeah, certainly a niche industry. It's growing, but there's still a lack of awareness, I think, in the community largely. But there is a great demand that we're still not able to meet with quantities. The Asian markets are really opening up for alpaca fibre. So it's something that we're trying to get more people involved, which means getting out there and just trying to get the message out that this is a real industry. I still get a bit annoyed when people say, "Oh, is it like ostriches?" The industry is alive and it is doing well and it is growing.
I wondered if that was a bit of a hurdle to get people, other people, I don't know, other farmers, but people out there to take you seriously. You know, oh, alpaca farming, that's not real, or goat farming. What's that all about? You know, is there still an obstacle there with people's perceptions?
Oh, very much so, I think. Do you find that with your goats?
I think it's the same. You know, we even get not called dairy. You know, we are dairy. We're just dairy goats as opposed to dairy cows. But people, when they think of dairy, they think of cows. And as I said before, I think we've purposely had a low profile up until now, but. Now I think we've got an opportunity to put a proposition to people to enter the industry, which is a profitable proposition for them.
Now, how big are these industries? Goat farming, you know, people are aware people have had goats in their backyards for years and years, but the cooperative was formed how many years ago? Around
about 30 years ago. We've got about 50 shareholding suppliers at the moment, and probably what would surprise a lot of people is that we're over $100 million per annum company. So we are a significant exporter. Most of that 100 million is export earnings.
That's quite a turnover.
So it is quite a significant industry, and one which, as I said, has really built up more in the last 10 or 15 years particularly.
And you say Asian sales account for the bulk of the business?
Yes, they do, and they will continue to be a really strong part of our business. However, we've recently opened up the European market by convincing the European Food Safety Authority around the suitability of goat milk protein for infant formula, a really significant event for the cooperative, which just happened this year, and so we're looking to open up the European markets in the near future as well.
And what does that mean? Previously, you couldn't make infant formula out of goat milk?
The way that the regulations have been written in Europe are different from how most countries have written their regulations around infant formula, and they actually excluded goat milk protein in their infant formula regulation, so we had to go through a process of clinical trials and studies and submissions to get them to change their rules. It took a number of years. It wasn't that easy.
Diane, looking at the global picture, I mean, South America, obviously, the alpaca has a long, noble history in South America, but who else around the world is buying alpaca? We've got a small industry here. Australia, I know, was pretty significant. That's your home.
Yes, yeah, well, that's where I started with my alpacas. Australia has probably the second largest herd in the world outside of South America. Then you'd have the USA coming next, and then although it's not a large herd here in New Zealand, it's certainly growing, and we are exporting to Europe, you know, live animals, that is. They are primarily a fibre animal. Meat and hides are a bit of a byproduct. Many people that have gone into the alpaca industry have done so because they don't want to be breeding animals that they know are going to be slaughtered. So there's a fledgling industry here now in New Zealand just getting started in the meat and hide, but there are certain segments of the industry that are very against that. But I see it is going to be the long-term future is there's always going to be animals that are not really good enough for breeding with, fleece is not good enough, and the pet market can only absorb so many. They are a very low maintenance animal, and apart from being very engaging, I think most people find alpaca quite interesting to be around. They're all individuals. You know, you look at alpaca in the eye and there's actually something there, unlike a lot of the broadacre livestock, I suppose. We got 2 animals to eat the grass the day that they were delivered. I offered the fellow a glass of wine, and 1 o'clock in the morning he said, "Gosh, I've got to go to work today," and went home, and by then I was already intrigued with the possibilities of improving. Being a young industry, there's a long way to go, and you can make big steps.
You came here, what, 1 or 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
I think you moved. Why did you move?
It was a bit of a compromise in downsizing our alpaca operation. I'm passionate about it. My husband wanted to have time to do more things, so we decided to go back to just having a very small herd. And my husband is actually from New Zealand originally. So we came back here for the milder climate, which is more for the humans than the animals. And I couldn't bear to leave my animals behind, so we chose the best 24 and flew them over with us.
And the potential in New Zealand, I mean, it's much smaller here, obviously, than it is in Australia, but you see a lot of promise.
Oh, very much so. The Asian market can't get enough of the alpaca product. We're in a bit of a chicken and the egg situation in the alpaca industry, that we need more fibre to meet the demands. You can create a demand, but then when you can't fulfil the demand, people aren't always prepared to wait. So it's a bit of a 1 step forward, or 2 steps forward, 1 step back, trying to get the demand but be able to fulfil it. Because alpaca fibre comes in a great array of colours, which has ups and downs. It's fabulous that you can have all the natural colours that don't need dyeing, they don't need all those processes, where people seem to be becoming more concerned about having natural products, people with allergies. But it means when you've got smaller quantities of each colour, you have to stockpile them before you can run them through the mills, because they've got to be cleaned every time you change colour.
Just going to go to a break. Coming up, more on alpacas and how New Zealand could be poised to develop this exotic import using the same technology, breeding practices and veterinary science refined for the sheep industry. Stay with us on Straight Talk. Hello, I'm Karen McCarthy and you're back with Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. My guests, alpaca farmer Diane Bulpit and Tony Giles from the Dairy Goat Cooperative. Both of you then, the only thing holding you back from even greater growth is farmer numbers. You need new blood, and Tony, you need it quickly.
Yes, we do. I think, and following on from some of the earlier points, it's really important. One of the principles of our industry is that we've actually been demand-led. In other words, we haven't just accepted a flood of milk. We've assessed what we think we can sell in various markets and new market opportunities, and then bring the milk on to support that. Now, that's been a really important part of our industry right from the very early days, because we haven't got a commodity market to throw all the extra milk into that we can't sell. So given that all of our product goes out under brands and is consumer packaged, it's very important that we are demand led like we are, and not a lot of industries are necessarily like that. However, things can get out of kilter, now and again, and they have when your demand goes up very, very quickly. It does take a year or two for the farms to be able to react and to supply the milk to support the new market development. And we're just in one of those phases at the moment. But we're getting a lot of interest about the industry at the moment, and we've already signed up 5 or 6 farmers to join the industry. We're looking for roughly that number again, and then probably 10 or 12 a year for the next 2 or 3 years.
How do you sell goat farming to people? I mean, what's in it for them?
Well, I think you've got to sell it as a good commercial proposition. Yeah, end of story. And effectively, we're competing for land use. We've got a number of farmers at the moment who are significant income earners in their own right. I mean, our average herd size is probably 600 milking goats, talking an income of $900,000 to $1 million a year. So. It's not small time, put it that way. But what we've got to do is just provide a payout and a return that means that the investment opportunity is considered to be a good one by the person entering the industry.
Diane, what's in it for alpaca breeders, alpaca farmers? That's the thing you say, you'd like new blood. How do you sell the animal?
Well, the alpaca industry, we're still very much in a ramping up phase. It's still very much a bloodstock industry because we need more numbers, and alpacas are slow breeders, and which means it takes you quite some time to build up numbers, but also when it comes to improving the fibre qualities, the generational intervals are quite long. So it's, I guess it's one of the things that makes it challenging and exciting, is because if you can make a big jump up in quality in one generation, you really know that you're onto something.
What's an average herd size in New Zealand? And can you give us an idea of the numbers? I mean, how many alpaca farmers or breeders are there out there?
I'm afraid I can't tell you about the number of people, but there's roughly around 15,000 alpaca, whereas Australia's around 150,000. In Australia, some of the larger farms have well over 1,000 animals.
Oh.
But I think in Australia and New Zealand, your average farm's probably only about 10 or 12. They're people that are, I guess they often have other jobs. And like a lot of industries, in a livestock industry, if it's going to be your sole income, it's not something you can do with just a handful. But with a medium-sized herd, if you're breeding better stock and people want your genetics, there's definitely a good income to be made there. And the export market for live animals is quite strong. And in fact, animals come via Australia to here on their way to Europe for quarantine purposes. So that's another market segment that's happening here in New Zealand.
Are alpacas and goats something that traditional farmers could get into as well as what they're doing already? Because that's the thing, you think of them as sort of, especially alpacas, as being, something lifestylers would go for. But is it something traditional farmers who've got some land they want to put to good use could get into?
Very much so, yes. It's quite a complementary industry, and alpacas are very low maintenance. They're less maintenance than sheep. So nobody's going to be taking on anything they're not already doing if they have sheep or even cattle at this stage.
Tony, is there a demand for live dairy goats? Export market?
Not really. That's not really something that we concern ourselves too much about. I mean, there are various breeding groups within the industry that deal with that side of it more.
It's the milk. The milk is the gold.
But it is the milk. We are very much focused on the milk, and not just the milk per se, but the milk that we can turn into high value consumer packaged nutritional powders that are exported. A lot of other goat industries around the world, they make cheeses, they make milks and yogurts and so on. We just keep right away from that and try and keep our focus as narrow as possible.
And that infant formula, that's your gold rush at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the industry's focus for a long time now. And it's important to have that focus because, you know, the way that you approach your markets, the way that you build your manufacturing facilities is all built around that business focus. And I think ultimately it's a real strength of the industry that we have had that very tight focus.
And for both of you, I know it's not just about the animals, it's not just about the milking, it's not just about, you know, growing the animals for the fleece. You've got to do something with it afterwards. With the goat cooperative, you've got four plants, is that right, in Hamilton, that are drying and yes, blending the product? Yes,
we have. As the industry's evolved, you know, and I think talking about industry evolution in your case is a really interesting thing. I mean, we wouldn't believe where we've got to. We wouldn't have believed it 10 years ago.
In such a short time.
Exactly. But you know, we own the manufacturing facilities now, so we've got the three plants on our 10 acres in Hamilton there. We've got a spray drying plant, we've got a blending plant, and more recently a canning plant, so that we can send the product out to market in a final finished form and actually have control over the quality and the supply chain. Very important for infant formula, which is one of the most highly regulated sort of food categories in the world, and where the quality standards are just, you know, several notches above standard food, if you like.
And that's the thing, you can guarantee this product from word to go. That's your big selling point.
It is, and you know, some industries talk about, you know, farm to fork or pasture to plate. We talk about barn to bottle because, you know, the way that our goats are managed, they're housed in the barns. That's to help with the animal health and production and so on. But we always think about the end product being in a baby's bottle or a child's cup of milk formula, and being able to control that whole supply chain and quality is just really integral to the industry.
That post-animal phase, I mean, that must be the challenge for the fledgling industry that is in New Zealand, and that you must have to look offshore for the processing of any fleece from the alpacas. Or does that happen here at all, or does it happen in Australia?
Well, that is one of the tricky things. And there are several breeders here in New Zealand who have been getting mini mills online, but it is still difficult. Again, as harking back to the colour ranges, but also micron ranges. So there's that stockpiling issue and tweaking with the machinery every time you change from one fibre to the next. But there are some good things being done here in New Zealand in the way of weaving and spinning and really top quality products, and not your sort of homespun, knobbly looking old things a lot of the earlier handcrafts might have had.
Well, you're wearing alpaca, I know, at the moment,
I
aren't
am,
you?
yes.
Proudly flying the flag. And that scarf, I know it's incredibly fine. It's beautiful fabric, isn't it?
Yes, that's an alpaca and silk blend. And that's from a company in Australia which was collecting almost all of the fleece up until recently. There's now some new players in the market there. But unfortunately, a lot of the manufacturing actually has to go offshore because it is quite difficult. Which means
it's a costly process, an expensive labour of love, I guess, to get into?
Yeah, although the sad thing is it's actually cheaper. These are processed in Peru, which is, of course, the home of the alpaca. And it goes a bit against the green message, unfortunately, to be sending them overseas.
But there was no other option, really?
No. It's a lot of the scouring, and also they've just got a lot more people on the ground to actually do the classing and the sorting when you've got the big colour ranges and the big micron variations. So hopefully, as we improve our bloodstock so that we've got greater evenness through our fleeces, perhaps things might get a little bit easier.
More in store after the break, including just how small is viable if you want to go goat farming. It's intensive but clearly profitable. We find out more about the outlay and the returns. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Straight Talk. We're with Tony Giles and Diane Bulpit. Just let's talk about goat farming again. You mentioned before the sort of income that can be made.
Yes,
it's obviously very profitable with a similar return to a dairy farmer, but from a much smaller property. What does the co-op pay in terms of, you know, per kilo milk solids? I know recently it's been an exceptional year, but
it
on
has.
average...
Yeah, a payout in the season just finished was $17.50 per kilogram of milk solids. And I think the reference to land size is quite an important one, because you can have a viable goat milk operation off a smaller land block than, for example, a dairy cow farm, so maybe 40 or 50 acres, that sort of size. And as I mentioned before, our average herd size is 500 or 600 milking goats, and so, you know, that's the sort of average scale, if you like. And
an average payout, I heard of it, is it $15 a kilo milk solids?
Yeah, that's sort of what our target is, and anything that we can make above that from other operations or favourable foreign exchange or whatever the case may be, we try and top it up as much as possible. But being a consumer industry, in terms of not being subject to the commodity upturns and downturns, it means we can keep a nice, stable and growing payout, which is really well received by our farmer shareholders.
And not affected by the high dollar?
The high dollar affects anybody who's exporting. We've just have to be, you know, quite aggressive and move our pricing to take account of that over the years. But yes, we'd certainly all prefer a lower dollar. There's no doubt about that.
You have members, I know, in Northland and Taranaki, but mostly in the Waikato.
That's right.
What makes that such a prime goat farming region?
I think, you know, the land in the Waikato is very good for farming, full stop. We've tended to consolidate our farms around that area because of the locality of our manufacturing facilities as much as anything. So it's more that than, you know, the land in the Waikato being any better than anywhere else. But you do need reasonably flat land that you can mow and cut and carry and bring the grass to the goats who are in their barns. Yep.
Climate and environment, you know, does it suit alpacas in New Zealand? Obviously, I mean, they're farmed now up and down the country. Is it a good place for alpacas? Yeah,
well, alpaca are very adaptable in their native country. They're up in the Altiplano, where it's freezing cold at night. It can be very high UV and hot during the day, and it looks like they eat rocks when you see photographs of them in Peru. But they can take from very cold to very hot, as I said. The grass here, of course, is very nutritious. When I moved my herd over from Australia, people said, "Oh, the micron's going to blow out." To this point, I haven't found that to be an issue.
They're very happy here.
Yes. Probably South Island would probably be, I guess, a bit more ideal than North Island, but they do very well here around the Auckland area. But less humidity, if you're looking for the perfect climate, I suppose, is better.
Talking Waikato, field days, we can't ignore that. Do either of your industries have a presence at Mystery Creek this year?
Yes, I believe that there's a group of alpaca farmers from that area that will be displaying there. And
yes, we also have some presence in terms of really trying to engage with potential new farmers and trying to you know, let them know and find out a bit more about the industry and try and encourage some more to join.
Those new farms that you're looking for, do they need to be from the Waikato, or could they be as long as they're sort of within shouting distance? Yeah.
I mean, we'll always look at you know, exactly what we can expand our pickup from, but yeah, fundamentally the Waikato is really where we're looking.
And what are the setup costs if somebody is watching this and thinks, hey, I might give that a go? What are they looking at in terms of setting up a farm?
Setting the land aside, you're probably looking at an investment of $2 to $3 million in terms of plant, machinery, buildings and shares to get into the industry for that sort of average, typical size of farm that I was talking about earlier.
What does a dairy goat cost?
Dairy goats, you know, it does depend a little bit on supply and demand, and we're actively trying to grow enough does to bring into the industry, so that's more of a sort of a supply and demand situation, which can change from time to time.
But on average, is there give us an idea?
I'm not really too sure, to be honest.
Yeah. What about an alpaca? How much is a good animal?
Good animal. I mean, you can get a pet from sort of $400 to $600. Some of the old girls are now around with fleeces that are no longer really what you're wanting, for about $1,000. But if you're looking for a reasonable girl, you're probably looking at somewhere between, well, you could start at $2,500 up to about $15,000. You can pay more. Last year in Australia, an animal was sold to Europe for $150,000 Australian, a male.
So friendly, low-maintenance animals and lots of money clearly to be made. Hopefully there's a few people out there interested who might get in touch after this.
Certainly.
That's it for Straight Talk this week, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Thank you to my guests, Diane Bulpit and Tony Giles, and as always, to you at home for watching. If you'd like to get in touch, see the Country 99 TV website for details on this and our other programs. If you can, get out and check out Field Days at Mystery Creek. I'm Karen McCarthy. See you next time for more Straight Talk.